Daniel Carter walked slowly through the silent ruins of the forgotten alien city. Broken towers rose around him like giant skeletons, their metal frames twisted and burned after a war that had ended many years ago. The wind moved through the empty streets and carried dust across the ground, making a soft whispering sound that made the place feel even more lonely. Daniel was a human scavenger who traveled from planet to planet, searching for old technology and anything valuable left behind after wars. Many people said this planet was cursed, but Daniel did not believe in curses. He believed in survival. His small scanner beeped quietly as he stepped over broken stones and pieces of alien machines, hoping to find something useful he could sell. Suddenly he stopped walking. For a moment, he thought he heard something strange. At first it sounded like the wind, but then he heard it again, a soft sound almost like someone crying. Daniel slowly turned his head and listened carefully. The sound came from deeper inside the ruins, behind a collapsed building covered in dark metal pieces. He frowned slightly, because this planet was supposed to be completely empty. Many dangerous hunters use traps to catch careless scavengers. Daniel carefully reached for the small plasma pistol on his belt and walked toward the sound, step by step. The crying became clearer as he moved closer. It was not an animal. It sounded like a child. Daniel's heart beat a little faster as he pushed aside a piece of broken wall and looked into the shadow behind it. At first he saw nothing but dust and rubble. Then he noticed a small figure sitting between two broken stones. It was a child, but not a human child. The little girl had pale blue skin that softly glowed in the dark shadows of the ruins. Her large silver eyes were filled with tears, and strange marks on her skin shimmered like faint stars. She looked frightened and weak, hugging her knees while small sobs escaped from her. For a few seconds, Daniel simply stood there, shocked by what he was seeing. An alien child, alone in the middle of a destroyed city. The girl looked up and saw him standing there. Her eyes widened with fear, and she tried to move back, but a piece of metal behind her stopped her. Daniel slowly raised both hands to show he was not a threat. "Easy, easy, I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. Of course he knew she might not understand his language, but sometimes tone was enough. The child watched him carefully, tears still running down her glowing cheeks. Daniel noticed a small injury on her arm where the skin looked burned. She must have been hiding here for a long time. The ruins around them were cold and dangerous, and there was no way a small child could survive here alone. Daniel slowly knelt down a few steps away, so he would not scare her. From his bag he pulled out a small bottle of water and gently placed it on the ground between them. The alien girl looked at the bottle for a moment, then slowly reached for it with shaking hands. She drank carefully, as if she was afraid someone might take it away from her. Daniel felt something strange in his chest as he watched her. He had come to this planet searching for scrap metal and old machines, but now he had found something far more important, a lost child. Suddenly, the small device on Daniel's belt started blinking red. His scanner was detecting something in the sky. Daniel quickly looked up toward the broken ceiling of the ruins. A low rumbling sound echoed across the empty city, growing louder every second. Then a powerful beam of blue light swept across the ground outside, scanning the ruins like a giant searching eye. Daniel's face became serious. Those were not normal ships. They were military hunters, and they were searching for something. Slowly, the alien child moved closer to Daniel and held the edge of his jacket with her small hand. Her glowing eyes were filled with fear as she whispered one soft word in a language he did not understand. But Daniel did not need to understand the word to know its meaning. She was asking for help, and high above the ruined city, the massive alien warships continued scanning the planet, searching for the missing child. Daniel Carter moved quickly through the dark ruins, while the scanning lights from the warships above swept across the broken city. The alien child still held the edge of his jacket with her small glowing hand, her silver eyes wide with fear every time the sky rumbled. Daniel knew they could not stay there, because if those hunters found them in the open ruins, they would both be captured in seconds. He gently crouched down and looked at the child, speaking in a calm voice, even though his mind was racing with danger. "It's okay, kid. We're leaving this place," he said softly. The girl did not understand his words, but she seemed to understand his tone. She nodded slowly and stayed close to him. Daniel carefully lifted a large metal panel that was leaning against the wall and revealed a narrow path between the rubble. "This way," he whispered to himself as he started moving. The two of them slipped between broken walls and fallen towers, staying inside the shadows while the bright scanning beams passed over the streets outside. Above them, the huge alien warships hovered like silent predators, their engines shaking the air with a deep thunder. Daniel's ship was hidden about half a kilometer away behind a collapsed hangar. If they could reach it, they might have a chance to escape, but the city was open ground in many places, and the hunters' scanners were powerful. The alien girl stumbled slightly while walking over the broken metal floor. Daniel stopped and looked at her arm again, noticing the burn mark was worse than he first thought. "Hold on," he murmured, kneeling beside her. He opened a small medical kit from his belt and gently sprayed a healing foam on the wound. The girl watched him carefully, confused but no longer as afraid. The foam glowed for a moment as it sealed the injury, and the girl blinked in surprise. For the first time since he found her, she gave a small, quiet sound that almost sounded like relief. Daniel smiled slightly. "See, not so scary," he said. Just then his scanner beeped again, louder this time. Daniel froze and looked at the screen. 3 small signals had appeared on the edge of the ruins, moving slowly across the city. Ground patrols. The hunters were sending soldiers to search the ruins. Daniel cursed quietly under his breath and quickly stood up. "We need to move now," he whispered. He took the girl's small hand and started running carefully through the broken streets, staying close to the walls and shadows. The wind carried the distant sound of metal footsteps somewhere behind them. The patrols were getting closer. After several tense minutes, they reached the collapsed hangar where Daniel had hidden his ship. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a pile of broken steel plates and fallen beams. But underneath the rubble was a small human cargo ship, old but reliable. Daniel quickly climbed over the metal and pushed aside a loose panel, revealing the hidden entrance hatch. He turned back toward the alien girl. "All right, kid, this is our ride," he said. The girl hesitated for a second, staring at the strange human machine. Then another loud rumble came from the sky above, and she quickly climbed inside. Daniel followed and sealed the hatch behind them. Inside the ship, the lights flickered on, filling the small cabin with a warm yellow glow. The alien girl looked around with wide, curious eyes, touching the seat and the glowing control panels, as if she had never seen human technology before. Daniel moved to the pilot chair and powered up the engines. The old ship hummed as energy flowed through its systems. Come on," he muttered while the navigation screen slowly activated. Suddenly, the alien girl made a soft sound and pointed toward the front screen. Daniel looked up. A message had appeared on every channel, written in several galactic languages. "Return the child immediately. Failure to comply will result in destruction." Daniel stared at the message for a long moment. Then he looked at the small alien girl standing quietly beside the pilot seat. She looked back at him with the same frightened silver eyes. For a second, Daniel considered his options. He was only a scavenger, not a hero. Those warships outside were powerful enough to destroy his little ship in seconds. But when the girl slowly grabbed his sleeve again, his decision was made. Daniel sighed and placed his hands on the controls. "Well, kid," he said quietly, "looks like we're in trouble together." Outside the hangar, the massive warship suddenly turned toward the hidden ship, their sensors locking onto its rising power signal. And a second later, their engines roared as they began the hunt. Daniel's small cargo ship burst out of the broken hangar and shot into the dark sky. Dust and pieces of metal scattered across the ruins as the engines roared to full power. Above the planet, the massive alien warships quickly turned toward the rising ship like predators spotting their prey. Inside the cockpit, warning lights flashed red across Daniel's control panel. "Target lock detected," the computer voice said calmly. Daniel gripped the controls tighter and pushed the engines harder. "Yeah, I figured that," he muttered under his breath. The little alien girl stood behind his chair, holding the back of the seat as the ship shook while climbing through the planet's thin clouds. She looked out the window with wide eyes as the huge warships followed them into the sky. Bright beams of scanning light stretched across the clouds like giant fingers searching for them. Daniel checked the radar screen and frowned. 3 ships. "And they're fast," he said quietly. A loud warning sound suddenly filled the cockpit. One of the warships fired a long blue energy beam that passed just behind Daniel's ship and exploded against the clouds. The blast shook the small cargo vessel violently. The alien girl lost her balance and almost fell. But Daniel quickly reached back and steadied her. "Easy, kid," he said, trying to stay calm even though his heart was racing. The girl looked at him with fear, then slowly moved closer to his side. Daniel took a deep breath and focused on flying. His ship was not built for battle, but it was small and fast, and sometimes that was enough to survive. He pulled the ship sharply to the left, diving into a thick cloud bank to hide from the scanners. For a moment, the radar screen went quiet. But only for a moment. The hunters were skilled and determined. Soon their signals appeared again, closing the distance slowly but surely. Daniel glanced at the girl again and noticed something strange. Around her neck hung a small pendant made of silver metal, carved with strange glowing lines that looked ancient and powerful. The symbol on the pendant pulsed softly with light, almost like it was alive. Daniel had seen many alien artifacts during his years of scavenging, but nothing like this. The girl noticed him looking at it and gently held the pendant in her small hand. Her glowing skin flickered faintly as if the object was connected to her somehow. Suddenly the ship shook again as another blast exploded nearby. "They're not giving up," Daniel said grimly. He quickly pushed several buttons and activated a defensive maneuver. The ship rolled and dived again, racing toward space while the hunters fired another series of energy shots behind them. The stars slowly appeared through the dark sky as Daniel finally broke free from the planet's atmosphere. But the danger was far from over. The 3 warships followed him into space like dark shadows, their engines glowing like small suns in the distance. Inside the cockpit, the alien girl suddenly spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft and unsure, as if she had not spoken to anyone in a long time. "Lyra," she said quietly, touching her chest. Daniel blinked and looked at her for a second before smiling slightly. "Lyra, huh?" he said. "Well, nice to meet you, Lyra." "I'm Daniel." The girl repeated his name slowly, trying to understand the strange human word. "Dan." "Eel," she whispered. Then she looked out the window again at the warships chasing them, and her face filled with fear. She pointed toward the ships and said a few quick words in her own language, shaking her head. Daniel did not understand the language, but the meaning was clear enough. Those ships were the reason her world had been destroyed. Lyra suddenly grabbed her pendant tightly, and the symbol began to glow brighter than before. Daniel noticed the light reflecting across the cockpit walls. Lyra, what's that doing?" he asked carefully. Before she could answer, the pendant suddenly released a pulse of soft blue light. The ship's computer screen flickered, and a hidden system Daniel had never seen before suddenly activated. A holographic star map appeared above the control panel, showing dozens of stars and a glowing path stretching across the galaxy. Daniel stared at it in complete shock. "I definitely did not install that," he said quietly. The map zoomed in on one distant system that blinked slowly with golden light, as if the pendant was showing them where to go. Behind them, the hunters suddenly increased their speed, closing the distance quickly. Daniel looked from the star map to the approaching warships, and then back to the small alien girl standing beside him. "Well, Lyra," he said with a nervous smile, "looks like your necklace just gave us a destination." He pushed the engine controls forward and aimed the ship toward the glowing star on the map. Behind them, the alien hunters followed closely, determined not to let their mysterious target escape. And deep inside the pendant, the ancient symbol continued glowing, as if it had finally awakened after many years of silence. The holographic star map floated above the control panel, glowing softly in the dark cockpit. Daniel Carter stared at it with wide eyes while the engines of his small cargo ship hummed loudly. The glowing path stretched across the galaxy like a bright road, leading toward a distant golden star system that Daniel had never seen before. Beside him, the small alien girl, Lyra, watched the map quietly, holding the shining pendant close to her chest. Outside the ship's rear window, The 3 alien warships were still chasing them through space, their engines burning like blue flames in the darkness. Daniel quickly checked the radar screen and shook his head slowly. "They're getting closer," he said quietly. The ship's warning alarm beeped again, reminding him that his vessel was not built for a long chase against military ships. Daniel leaned back slightly in his seat and studied this strange map again. The golden star on the map blinked slowly, almost as if it was calling them. "All right," Daniel said, thinking out loud. "If your necklace wants us to go there, I guess that's where we're going." He pressed several controls and began entering the coordinates into the navigation system. The computer processed the information for a moment before displaying the result. Destination unknown. Ancient coordinates detected. Daniel raised an eyebrow at the message. "Ancient, huh?" he murmured. That only made the situation more mysterious. Behind him, Lyra carefully stepped closer and looked at the screen. Her glowing silver eyes reflected the image of the star map, as if she recognized something about it. She slowly reached out and touched the floating hologram. The moment her finger passed through the light, the map suddenly changed. New symbols appeared across the image, symbols that looked very old and powerful. The ship's computer began translating some of them automatically. Royal Pathway activated. Daniel blinked in surprise. "Royal Pathway," he repeated softly. He turned slightly to look at Lyra. "Kid, what exactly are you?" he wondered quietly. Lyra did not understand his words, but she seemed to feel the tension in his voice. She pointed at the golden star on the map and spoke a few soft words in her own language. Her voice sounded hopeful but also sad. Daniel guessed that place must mean something important to her. Suddenly the ship shook violently as a powerful blast exploded close behind them. Daniel grabbed the controls quickly and stabilized the ship. The hunters had fired another energy shot. "They're not very patient," Daniel said with a nervous smile. He pushed the engines harder, but his ship was already near its limit. The radar showed the warships moving closer every second. Daniel knew they could not outrun them forever. At that moment, Lyra's pendant began glowing again, brighter than before. The light spread across the cockpit walls, filling the small space with soft blue energy. Daniel looked down at the glowing pendant with concern. "Lyra, what's happening now?" he asked carefully. The girl held the pendant tightly, and suddenly a pulse of energy moved through the ship's systems. For a second, the control screens flickered. Then a new message appeared on the main display. "Ancient defense system detected. Activating protective field." Before Daniel could even react, a thin, transparent shield formed around the ship, glowing faintly like a bubble of light. Just then another energy blast from the hunters slammed directly into the ship. But instead of destroying the vessel, the blast scattered across the glowing shield and faded into space. Daniel's mouth slowly opened in surprise. "Well, that's new," he said quietly. The shield continued glowing gently around the ship, protecting it from the attacks. Behind them, the warships seemed confused for a moment as their weapons suddenly became useless. Inside the cockpit, Lyra looked at the shield and then at Daniel. For the first time since he found her, she smiled slightly. It was a small and shy smile, but it carried a little bit of hope. Daniel laughed softly, feeling a little relief for the first time since the chase began. "Okay, kid," he said. "Maybe your necklace is the best co-pilot I've ever had." The star map blinked again and zoomed closer to the golden star system. More ancient symbols appeared across the screen as the computer continued translating slowly. Finally, one line of text appeared clearly in the center of the map. "Royal blood detected. Authorized heir identified." Daniel stared at the message for several seconds. Then he slowly turned toward Lyra again. The small alien girl stood quietly beside him, her silver eyes glowing softly in the cockpit light. Daniel suddenly realized the truth that had been hiding in front of him the whole time. Lyra was not just a lost child from a destroyed world. She was something far more important, far more valuable, and far more dangerous to protect. Outside the ship, the alien warships regrouped and changed their attack formation, preparing a new strategy to capture their target. But inside the cargo ship, the glowing star map continued guiding Daniel and Lyra toward the mysterious golden star, toward a place that might change the future of the entire galaxy. Daniel Carter sat silently in the pilot seat while the glowing message still floated on the screen in front of him. Royal blood detected. Authorized heir identified. The words slowly faded, but their meaning stayed heavy in his mind. He turned his head and looked at the small alien girl standing beside him. Lyra looked back at him with calm silver eyes, unaware of how important that message was. Daniel leaned back in his chair and sighed softly. "So you're not just any lost kid," he said quietly. "You're some kind of princess." Of course, Lyra could not understand his words, but she seemed to sense the change in his voice. She gently held the glowing pendant and looked again at the golden star on the holographic map. Outside the ship, the dark, endless space stretched in every direction, filled with distant stars and silent danger. But the 3 alien warships were still there, chasing them like hungry wolves. Daniel checked the radar again and frowned. "They're still right behind us," he muttered. The protective shield created by the pendant was still glowing around the ship, but Daniel knew it might not last forever. Military ships always found a way to break through defenses eventually. He looked again at the golden star system marked on the map. If they could reach that place, maybe they would finally find safety, but the distance was still very far. Daniel rubbed his face with one hand and thought carefully. Helping this child had already turned his simple scavenger life upside down. Now he was being chased across space by powerful alien hunters, and the child he rescued might actually be the last heir of an entire alien empire. Daniel laughed quietly at the strange situation. "Well, Daniel," he said to himself, "you always wanted adventure." Behind him, Lyra slowly walked around the cockpit, touching the glowing control panels with curiosity. Human technology seemed very strange to her, but she watched everything carefully as if she was learning. Suddenly she stopped near the front window and looked out into space. Daniel noticed her expression change. The hope in her eyes slowly turned into sadness. She raised her small hand and pointed toward the distant stars, whispering something in her language. Daniel guessed she was thinking about her home world, the destroyed city where he had found her crying in the ruins. He felt a small pain in his chest thinking about it. No child should have to see their entire world destroyed. Daniel stood up from his chair and walked over to her slowly. For a moment they both looked silently out the large front window at the stars passing by. Then Daniel spoke gently. "I don't know what happened to your people," he said softly, "but I promise I'll help you reach that place on the map." Lyra did not understand the words, but she seemed to understand the promise. She looked up at Daniel and gave a small nod. Just then the ship suddenly shook as another blast struck the protective shield outside. Daniel quickly returned to the pilot seat. The hunters had changed their attack pattern again, firing stronger energy beams in an attempt to weaken the shield. "They're getting serious now," Daniel said, gripping the controls. The radar screen showed the enemy ships spreading out, trying to surround them. Daniel knew he could not outrun 3 warships forever. He needed a new plan. He quickly opened the ship's engineering screen and studied the power levels. His cargo ship was old, but it still had a few tricks left. "All right," he said slowly, thinking out loud again. "If they want a chase, let's give them one." Daniel suddenly changed direction and pushed the engines to full power. The small ship shot forward faster than before, racing toward a nearby asteroid field that floated in the distance like a cloud of dark rocks. Asteroid fields were dangerous to fly through, especially at high speed, but large warships hated them even more. Behind them the hunters quickly followed, their engines glowing brighter as they tried to keep up. Inside the cockpit, the ship shook as it entered the edge of the asteroid field. Massive rocks drifted slowly through space, some as large as mountains. Daniel steered the ship between them carefully but quickly. Lyra held onto the side of the seat while watching the giant stones pass close outside the window. One wrong move could destroy the ship instantly, but Daniel had flown through dangerous places before. He moved the controls with skill and focus, guiding the ship through the moving maze of asteroids. Behind them the warships slowed down slightly, trying to avoid crashing into the rocks. Daniel smiled slightly when he saw the distance between them increase. "See that, Lyra?" he said proudly. "Humans are pretty good at crazy flying." Lyra looked at him with curiosity, not fully understanding but clearly impressed. But the victory did not last long. Suddenly, the radar screen flashed again with a new signal. Daniel's smile disappeared immediately. A much larger ship had just appeared at the far side of the asteroid field. Its size was enormous, far bigger than the 3 hunters chasing them, and its weapons were already powering up. Daniel stared at the screen and whispered slowly, "Well, that can't be good." The massive warship turned directly toward Daniel's small cargo vessel, blocking the path to the Golden Star system, and for the first time since the chase began, escape suddenly looked impossible. The massive warship hung in space like a dark mountain, blocking the only path out of the asteroid field. Its metal surface was covered with rows of glowing weapons that slowly powered up, each one strong enough to destroy Daniel's small cargo ship in seconds. Inside the cockpit, Daniel Carter stared at the radar screen and felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Behind them, the 3 hunter ships were still moving through the asteroids, closing in slowly from the rear. And now a giant warship waited in front of them. They were trapped. Daniel ran one hand through his hair and let out a long breath. "Well, kid," he said quietly while looking at Lyra, "this is not exactly the ending I was hoping for." Lyra stood beside the seat and watched the huge ship outside the window. Her glowing silver eyes looked small compared to the enormous enemy vessel floating ahead of them. She seemed to understand the danger, even if she could not understand Daniel's words. The pendant around her neck started glowing again, reacting to her fear. Soft blue light filled the cockpit once more. Daniel noticed the light and looked at the pendant carefully. "That thing has helped us before," he said slowly. "Maybe it has another surprise." Outside the ship, a deep voice suddenly echoed through the communication speakers. The alien warship had opened a channel. A cold mechanical voice filled the cockpit. "Surrender the royal child immediately," the voice commanded. "You will not be harmed if you comply." Daniel rolled his eyes slightly. "Yeah, I've heard that line before," he muttered. He looked at Lyra again. The small alien girl had moved closer to him and held his sleeve again, like she had done back in the ruins. Her expression was frightened, but trusting. Daniel understood what that meant. She believed he would protect her. That simple trust made his decision easier. Daniel straightened in the pilot seat and spoke toward the communication speaker. "Sorry, big guy," he said calmly, "but I'm not handing the kid over." For a few seconds the channel stayed silent. Then the cold voice returned, much more serious this time. "Then you will be destroyed." The communication channel closed immediately. Outside, the giant warship began charging its main weapon. A huge glowing cannon slowly pointed toward Daniel's small ship. Even the asteroids around them glowed faintly from the growing energy. Daniel quickly checked his ship's systems, knowing he only had seconds to act. His cargo ship had no weapon strong enough to fight a warship like that. But humans had one advantage that many powerful empires often forgot: creativity. Daniel suddenly opened the engineering panel and began pressing several controls quickly. The ship's engine power started rising above normal levels. Warning lights flashed across the cockpit as the computer protested. "Engine overload risk detected." Daniel ignored the warning and continued preparing his plan. "Hold on tight," he told Lyra. She quickly grabbed the side of the seat as the ship vibrated harder. Outside, the giant warship finished charging its weapon. A massive beam of bright energy shot forward, racing toward Daniel's ship like a blazing comet. At the last second, Daniel pushed the controls forward and fired the engines to maximum power. The cargo ship suddenly shot sideways at incredible speed, barely avoiding the deadly blast. The energy beam missed them by only a few meters and slammed into a massive asteroid behind them. The giant rock exploded into thousands of smaller pieces, sending debris flying across space. Daniel immediately turned the ship toward the spreading cloud of broken asteroids. His plan was simple but dangerous. If the battlefield became chaotic enough, the larger ships would struggle to move safely, but a small cargo ship might slip through the chaos. The broken asteroid pieces began drifting everywhere like a storm of floating rocks. The 3 hunter ships behind them slowed down to avoid collisions. Even the giant warship had trouble moving through the cloud of debris. Inside the cockpit, Daniel carefully steered through the moving rocks, dodging chunks of stone while pushing the engines beyond their safe limit. Sweat formed on his forehead as he focused on every movement. Behind him, Lyra watched silently, holding the glowing pendant tightly. Suddenly the pendant pulsed again, much stronger than before. A wave of energy spread through the ship and out into space. Daniel's instruments flickered as something new appeared on the radar screen. Several unknown signals suddenly appeared near the golden star system ahead. Large signals, very large signals. Daniel looked closer, and his eyes widened with surprise. Dozens of massive ships were slowly appearing from hidden positions near the distant star. Their shapes looked ancient but powerful, far older than the ships chasing him. And every single one of them was now moving toward Daniel's small cargo vessel. The glowing star on the map suddenly flashed brightly, as if the ancient fleet had finally awakened. And as the enemy warship tried to push through the storm of asteroids, a new and powerful force was rising from the distant star to meet them. The storm of broken asteroids slowly drifted through space while Daniel Carter guided his damaged cargo ship toward the distant golden star. Behind him, the giant enemy warship struggled to move through the cloud of floating rocks, its engines burning bright as it forced its way forward. But something else had changed in the darkness ahead. The radar screen inside Daniel's cockpit was now filled with dozens of large signals slowly appearing near the golden star system. Daniel leaned closer to the screen and shook his head in disbelief. "Those are ships," he whispered softly. "Big ships. They were not like the hunters chasing him. Their shapes were different, older, and far more powerful. Each vessel looked massive and ancient, covered with glowing patterns similar to the symbol on Lyra's pendant. For a moment, Daniel wondered if he had flown straight into another danger. But then Lyra stepped forward and looked at the glowing star outside the window. Her silver eyes filled with sudden hope. The pendant around her neck began shining brighter than ever before. A warm golden light spread across the cockpit, reflecting in her glowing skin. The holographic star map appeared again above the control panel without Daniel touching anything. This time new words slowly formed in the air. Royal Air arrival confirmed. Ancient Guardian fleet activated. Daniel blinked several times while reading the message. Then he looked out the front window again. The massive ships near the star were beginning to move. One by one they turned and started flying toward Daniel's small cargo ship. But they were not aiming their weapons at him. They were forming a protective wall between Daniel and the enemy warship behind him. "Kid," Daniel said quietly while looking at Lyra, "I think those ships are here for you." Lyra stepped closer to the glass and watched the ancient fleet approach. Her face filled with emotion. She placed her small glowing hand against the window as if greeting the ships. And suddenly every ancient vessel answered. Bright golden lights appeared across their surfaces as they recognized the royal pendant signal. Far behind them, the enemy warship finally escaped the asteroid storm and moved forward again. But the moment it saw the massive Guardian fleet protecting Daniel's ship, it slowed down. The hunters behind it stopped as well. The powerful alien voice returned through the communication channel. But this time it sounded less confident. "Return the royal child," the voice demanded again. "She belongs to our empire now." Daniel leaned toward the communication speaker and smiled slightly. "Yeah," he replied calmly. "I don't think that's happening." Before the enemy could answer, the ancient Guardian fleet moved into formation. Hundreds of glowing cannons slowly powered up across their hulls. Their energy levels were far greater than anything Daniel had seen before. The giant warship hesitated for a moment. Then it fired its main weapon again, sending a huge beam of destructive energy toward the small cargo ship. But the beam never reached its target. One of the ancient Guardian ships moved forward and released a powerful shield that blocked the attack completely. The beam scattered across the glowing barrier like harmless light. A second later, the Guardian fleet answered. Several golden energy blasts shot forward at incredible speed, striking the enemy warship with overwhelming force. The giant vessel shook violently as its shields collapsed almost instantly. Realizing the battle was lost, the enemy ships quickly turned and retreated into deep space, disappearing among the distant stars. Silence slowly returned to the battlefield. Inside the cockpit, Daniel leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "Well," he said softly, "that was exciting. Outside the window, the ancient fleet slowly surrounded Daniel's ship, but their weapons powered down peacefully. One large vessel moved closer than the others and opened a bright landing corridor made of light, inviting them inside. Lyra looked at Daniel and gently took his hand. Her expression was no longer frightened. It was full of trust and gratitude. Daniel smiled at her and nodded. "Looks like your people are home," he said. The cargo ship slowly entered the glowing corridor and landed inside the enormous Guardian vessel. When the doors opened, several tall alien beings waited there, wearing robes marked with the same ancient symbol as Lyra's pendant. The moment they saw her, they bowed deeply in respect. One of them stepped forward and spoke softly in her language. Lyra listened carefully and then turned back toward Daniel. For a moment she looked like she might cry again, but this time the tears were not from fear. She hugged Daniel tightly before stepping back toward her people. Even without words, Daniel understood what she meant. "Thank you." As the Guardian fleet prepared to guide their princess home, a new message spread quietly across the galaxy. A story about a simple human scavenger who had protected the last royal child of a fallen alien empire. And from that day forward, many worlds would remember the legend. The human who found a crying alien child in the ruins and helped her rise again to change the future of the galaxy. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness could echo across the stars forever.